There's your signature.
You taking everybody now? Is how you do it?
Yeah, but mostly you.
That's a good idea. You don't know what I'm going to do next.
Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. Today I would like to tell you a story about farmers markets and the current crazy situation with the virus. And the story of the farmers market really is a story. It has a plot line, it has characters, it has threats, even though I wouldn't call them bad guys, and its resolution remains to be seen. We sell the majority of our products at the Ithaca Farmers Market, and the Ithaca Farmers Market is a system. It runs 5 markets a week all summer long, and it caters to a local population who is very aware of the importance of local food and local farms, as well as a transient population of students from Cornell and Ithaca College. And the population of Tompkins County almost doubles when school is in session. Holding a large farmers market like Ithaca isn't as simple as you would think, and the pandemic has put great stress on the market. I suspect the same thing is happening to large farmers markets around the country. First off, I'll show you what the Saturday market was like last weekend. This is nothing like what the market is in a normal season. The market's made rules to address the virus. Everyone has to wear a mask over their mouth and nose at all times in the pavilion, and this is strictly enforced. Vendors have to bag their products as much as possible. And prepared ready-to-eat foods and drinks are served in takeout containers and can't be eaten in the pavilion. Everyone has to keep 6 feet apart whenever possible, and there's stripes all over the place to keep people from congregating and mobbing up. The pavilion capacity is limited to 150 people, which is a ghost town compared to usual. Normally, we'll get 700 or even more people in the pavilion at one time. There are attendants at both pavilion entrances counting people going in and out to stay below maximum capacity. And only a maximum of 4 people per household are let in. Because pavilion capacity is limited, people have to wait in line to get in, and the lines get long. This is a large market, and putting together a market like Ithaca is a complicated thing. It's not just a bunch of pop-up tents in a parking lot somewhere. The market has 2 to 4 paid staff members depending on the time of year. It has a board of directors, which is volunteer. They don't get paid. And then it's got a whole slew of committees that look at things like approving vendors, approving products sold at the market, doing planning for the market, all kinds of things. Not an easy organization to keep running and put together. The member's guide or rule book is 25 pages long. That's a lot to learn when you enter the system. And when you enter the Ithaca Farmers Market system, there are different tiers of vendors. So you start out as an easy entry vendor. And then as you accumulate points by attending markets and based on how many years you've been in the system, eventually you graduate to become a full market member or member of the market corporation. And then, if you've been a full member long enough and you continue to accrue enough points, eventually, hopefully, you get your own stall in the pavilion, which means you practically own the stall. You get the same spot every weekend. Now, we're not there. We're full members, but we don't have our own stall yet. Luckily, we have enough seniority of points after 7 years in the market to occupy mostly the same stall every weekend, because some vendors who own their own stalls get excused from the market for health reasons or whatever, and that gives us a place to sell. Now let's get down to brass tacks and start setting up the tension that underlies the farmers market. The farmers market is not only composed of farmers. Under its bylaws, the Ithaca Farmers Market is composed of 60% ag vendors, farmers, 20% artisans, which make and sell their own things like woodworking and pottery and soap and textile work, and the other 20% is prepared food vendors. These vendors prepare food on site and sell it ready to eat to customers. Now that I've given you an idea of how the market operates and its complexity, we can get into what went down when the virus hit in March. We were in the middle of our winter market, which is held inside of a shopping plaza, and it's attended by about 30 to 40 vendors. It happens once a week on Saturdays, and about 3/4 of those vendors are farmers. At the end of March, when everything went crazy, we moved outside into a lower risk environment, and that was to our summer location in the pavilion, which you're seeing in this video. The pavilion holds about 90 vendors, so we were able to space ourselves every other booth and maintain a good distance. the market asked customers to limit themselves to 1 or maybe 2 people per household. My sales exploded when this thing hit, both at the farmers market and from the farm. The problem was that this was a point in the year when normally we carry very little freezer stock because it's a slow point in our selling season. So pretty soon our freezers were empty except for pork and eggs, and luckily we had just taken about 20 pigs to the butcher. I knew that there was a risk to me and my family by my attending the market during this time, but I felt that the risk was worth it. I felt almost like a first responder because we were helping to ensure the local food supply during a time of crisis. This is the key thing about Saturday market from the end of March through June. The market was almost completely populated by farmers because, in a sense, they extended the winter market. The winter vendors came outside into the pavilion, spaced themselves out. So it was a farmer's market in definition as well as in spirit. In June, as the governor of New York started to ease restrictions, the market decided to reopen the Sunday market, so we would have a Saturday and Sunday market. They kept the Saturday market the same, so remember, we've got a Saturday market that's almost all populated by farmers, and they let the vendors in who couldn't get in on Saturday on Sunday. So we have primarily on Sunday artisans and food vendors. Now, they weren't very happy about this because traditionally the Sunday market is much less populated than the Saturday market. Customers prefer to come on Saturdays, and that's where the selling's at. What happened to us because of the way this all worked out is our sales continued to stay way up. And this is why. In normal years, it gets so crowded with students and tourists in the afternoon that the locals don't want any part of it. So what they do is they rush into the market at 9 a.m. when it opens, they get their groceries, and they're out of there by 11 when the crowds start to form. The locals don't want the hassle of waiting in line to park their car and shuffling through the crowds in the pavilion that are there to sightsee. And I can't blame them, given the choice of shopping at the grocery store, which is no hassle, versus dealing with the market craziness. They choose not to. And I think it's a shame because local food is principally what the market is about, I think. So you have 2 or possibly 3 vendor groups sharing the same pavilion in the market, and they each have distinct customer bases. You've got farmers or ag on one side that want the locals, and you've got food and sometimes artisans on the other side who want that transient population to keep moving through and buying their wares. The artisans fall someplace in the middle as far as which population group they prefer because it depends on what they're selling, and there's a wide range of items. So what happened on Saturdays in the spring is the market turning into a market without the appeal to the transient population because it was just farmers. You couldn't hang out and have food. The locals came back to the market. They started coming in greater numbers than I had seen in the 7 years I've been there. And the market for me was busy not just from 9 to 11 a.m., but it was busy all day as more locals felt less encumbered by the crowds to come in. And all the while, this exacerbated a tension that underlies the whole market ever since I've started in it. That is, you have 3 vendor groups and 2 distinct customer bases, and friction between the vendors as to which customer base should feel most welcome at the market. The virus only stressed this relationship as cracks became apparent by splitting the market into farmers one day and food and artisans into another. There were a whole lot of unhappy vendors, and as is human nature, those vendors vented their frustration mostly on the market management and the board, and it's a terrible place to be, especially in a volunteer position. I'm not even getting paid for this, and I got all these people harassing me. So in a normal year, there's some general unhappiness amongst the vendors, but this spring it was really starting to get to a boiling point. July came, and the governor eased restrictions further, and the market decided to go back to its normal setup where we've got 90 vendors or so in one booth after another, and we've got food and artisan and ag all mixed together on both Saturdays and Sundays. Hopefully this would relieve the tension. But it didn't. things actually got worse. That second customer base flooded back into the pavilion, and all of a sudden the health department was cracking down on the market saying, you've got to maintain social distancing and you've got to make the market a safe place. In response, the market put a capacity limit on the pavilion of 150 people and stationed market staff at both main entrances to count people going in and out. So once the pavilion reached capacity, a line would form outside the pavilion of people waiting to get in the pavilion. Some people would wait as long as 45 minutes to an hour. The lines were incredibly long. And the locals went back to their old behavior, but it got even worse because now they started rushing in at 8:15 or 8:30, technically before the market opened, because the line outside the pavilion would start to form at 9 o'clock on busy weekends. What happened to my business? It tanked. All my business happens now between 8:30 and about 10:30, and I spend the next 4 hours sitting around waiting for market to end. And that's the way the market continues to this day. And there's a huge fallout from all this mess. Nobody's happy. The farmers are unhappy because they got the chance to experience a true farmers market and their business has gone way down for the most part. The food vendors are unhappy because the market management is limiting how many people can go into the pavilion, so they're not doing as much business as they would in a normal year. And the artisans are somewhere in the middle, depending on whether they depend more on the transient population or the local population for their business. The market staff are unhappy because they're getting hammered on. They're getting hammered on by both the customers and the vendors. The customers want them to let them through the line and into the pavilion. They don't want to stand there and wait to get in. And the vendors are unhappy because they think that the market should be run differently according to each of their needs for customer base. It's a hard situation. And to add to all that, the market environment starts to feel unsafe with all these people stacked up waiting to get in. In the early days, I thought it was worth the risk because I felt I was doing something important for the local community. Now it feels like I'm just going to some kind of social festival, and I continually wonder, and I'm put in the awful position of either sacrificing my means to make a living or entering this unsafe environment to make a living. It's a crappy choice. And in an attempt to balance all of the diverse needs of the vendors, the market board of directors has actually ticked off most of the members as a result. In essence, the virus has opened the market's old wounds wide. There's always been a schism between mainly farmers and food vendors over who the market should attract, and the virus has made it worse with the change in rules. So how can all this be resolved? Well, I have to think that this is an issue that underlies a lot of large farmers markets. Not only Ithaca, markets that are in large urban areas got to share this problem. And I don't think that this problem is going to go away whenever this virus thing goes away, because the underlying tensions have been there since the beginning. Currently, the thinking of the market leadership is that they can solve or alleviate this problem by tearing down the old pavilion and building a new, larger pavilion, possibly moving the food vendors into one end of the pavilion so that the crowds stay there. But you know as well as I, crowds don't stay where you want them to stay. And I think they're going to have the same overcrowding issues both in the parking lot and in the pavilion, no matter how large they build it. And I think it's an expensive and circuitous way to address the problem. And the added factor is the pavilion that you see in this video is beautiful, and the grounds outside are beautiful. And those things were made with the members' own hands back in the day when the members cared enough about the market to invest tons of time into making it better and successful. So much care was put into that pavilion, and so much memory lies in that place. To see that place just kind of disrespectfully demolished for some new pavilion that's going to look completely different because of changed building codes just doesn't make sense to me, and it flies in the face of the way that a lot of our farms at the market operate, which is being frugal with our money. If my car's broke down, I don't go and buy a new car, I fix it. So if building a new pavilion isn't the answer, what is the answer? Well, let's continue the car analogy. If my car's broken or my tractor is down, I don't go out and buy a new tractor, I fix the one I have. They need to fix the problem, not dance around it. So my opinion is they need to get straight to the heart of this issue of serving two different customer and vendor bases at the market. They need to sit everybody in a room and come to a resolution of this problem. Yes, that's a difficult thing to do because people are going to get mad, but you have to do it. It's at the heart of conflict resolution. You don't just address the peripheral issues. You go straight to the heart of the problem, and you find a way to keep this negativity from poisoning the market forever. So that's my story of the farmers market. I don't know if it'll have a happy ending. It certainly would make a great anthropology study of how different groups of people interact, and I hope it doesn't turn into a murder mystery. Hillary and I have taken the sort of opinion that there's little we can do to affect the course of the market. So rather than getting involved with all this mess, aside from making this video, kind of stay out of it, because there's only bad blood to be had by making waves, and I think that's the prudent course. I worried about making this video because here I am sort of critically looking at the organization that makes all of our money. I mean, this is where we make our living. It doesn't work the best, but it works well enough for us to continue to go, and we'll evaluate that as time goes on. I hope this was interesting, even if you're not a customer of the Ithaca Farmers Market. It has interesting interactions. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.